Hello, welcome to All of the Day. This is week 2 of the Game of the Year podcast. So let's introduce everyone. Say hello, Cheston.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing this week?
I'm still recovering from watching the newest Spider-Man movie.
Yes, Cheston is one of the few people in the world that dislikes it.
Oh, I was going to say, I will clarify that when I recover, it's not like breathless enthusiasm. It's breathless scorn.
Yes, but we have a oath. We are not an MCU geek culture podcast, so we will not be talking about that. But I want to get his opinion out there, so you can criticize him if you choose to.
Yeah, that's fine. Come at me. You're probably an idiot, so good luck forming a sentence.
Someone that's distracted by key jingling, whatever. And
We'll
also
get to
with
that.
us, with us is Setzer. How you doing, Setzer?
I'm good. How about yourself, Derek?
I'm not bad. It's been a slow week, but I'm ready for this year to end. I think most people are.
Yeah,
but
amen.
I feel like that
Well,
goes every year. So.
As the sequel to 2020, I feel like it improved in some ways, but it did introduce some unfortunate plot complications along the way, as usual.
My prediction of 2021 will be worse than 2020 was inaccurate, but it wasn't that far off. I don't think.
I think it was far off, but it still could have been better.
Could have been better. You're right about that.
Yeah, I'm feeling 2022 could be the great end to the trilogy that we deserve.
The Rise of Skywalker of years.
Oh no!
Maybe the Back to the Future 3. I don't know.
And somehow smallpox came back.
Oh boy, can you imagine? Yes, I can.
Yeah. Yes.
So last week we went over a bunch of awards and goofy fun stuff. This week we're just going to be talking about our top 5 best games of the year. What qualifies as a top 5 will differ from person to person, but for me it'll be what games I played this year. I assume for Setzer, because he's played one game release this year, it'll be best games he played in the year, but we'll see as we go.
I'm going to pick the games that I think are the most important.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, as you
Quote unquote important.
Vox journalist Cheston over here. Thank you. So, you know what, Cheston, why don't you get us started?
All right. Well, I'll start with some fun little honorable mentions here. First honorable mention to the game I played the most this year, Picross S on the Nintendo Switch, the Sega Genesis Master System version, not the Mega Drive version.
What's the S stand for?
Europeans.
Sega, Switch, or shit?
I think all of the Picross games on Switch have an S in them, so I'm assuming Switch.
Okay. I have my money on shit, but
there is definitely nothing to say about Picross. It's good. I played a lot of it because it was a really nice, easy game to sink into before and after work, and that's why it's honorably mentioned, but not in my top 5. That's where we're at with Picross.
All right.
I will also honorably mention the Gunk, which I just started and haven't played enough.
Mention.
It is. It came out Thursday, and so far what I've played is just a delightful little platformer. I don't know that it would have made my top 5 if I had played the whole thing, but I think it certainly would have stuck out to me. It's just Derek, you actually should play this one. It's like a throwback to a AA PlayStation 2 / GameCube platformer. So it's got some really fun ideas. It's pretty short.
I like the sound of that.
Really simple, not overwrought with useless mechanics. Just gets right to the point, and it's pretty good. So honorable mention for that.
I miss the AA feel in games, so I'm down for that.
Yeah, and so the honorable mention to the game that was the closest to making the top 5 and almost made it was probably one play session too much, and then that last play session is what killed me on it, and that's Halo Infinite. So we've talked a lot about Halo Infinite, and I don't have too much to add. I've come to the point where I actually like the multiplayer and can make peace with it for one reason or another. I mean, it isn't perfect. There's not enough maps. The microtransaction stuff is still really scummy, but I can choose my playlist a little better now, and so I can kind of get into the types of matches I want. And if I want to do objective stuff, I can. And if I don't, I don't. and I played it with a friend the other night, and that was just a nice time. And I've played it here and there with some like background noise, and it's just really, really good for that. And I do generally enjoy the game on multiplayer. I think the single player is kind of a giant ball of ass, though.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
took
kind of.
me probably 3 hours to see that. I think the first two, okay, the first hour you're doing very linear levels, and I thought that was pretty good.
Hmm.
I thought the shooting felt great. It felt great to do the same stuff you're doing in multiplayer, but with the enemy AI, because you're a little
Hmm.
more successful at that than you are in multiplayer. At least I am. So that was nice.
Yeah.
And, look good. Uh, the characterization of Chief seemed a little better than Halo 4. So I was really into that. Second hour, I loved it. I wanted to play it a whole bunch. The
Hmm.
world opens up and you're doing some of those fobs and some of those outposts, and you're just having a really good time driving from waypoint to waypoint and going about your day. And then the third hour, I just did that again, and I realized that that's really all that the game has.
Yep.
And mind you, I haven't finished the game because I uninstalled the campaign after my 3 or 4 hours with it.
So you
But
haven't beaten it.
no, but I can't
Okay.
imagine that it gets better because I could see the
No.
writing on the wall pretty quick that it's like, you could spend 10 minutes walking from objective to objective and there's nothing there. Like the open world
Yeah.
is just this big, well, it's a forest, but it's a desert. It's a
Hmm.
desert forest. There's
Hmm.
nothing in there. And
No.
I read these reviews and uh, criticisms that are saying things like, this open world is the culmination of 20 years of Halo, and there's so
It's
much
magical.
discovery. There's so much discovery between your points, and like discovery of what? Like
Yeah.
at best, you'll find a box with a Spartan core in it, but that's not
Yeah.
really what I call discovery. You
And
know,
most of those are marked on the map anyway.
yes, and if people want to compare this to Breath of the Wild, you do you, but Breath of the Wild for darn sure had actual exploration, had an actual open world, had actual moments of discovery when you were going between your destinations where you would get distracted by something and be like, wow, that's really cool.
It also should be noted that nothing at Breath of the Wild is marked on your map for you. You have to discover everything. So just
Yes.
so if like
Mhm.
these cores are marked on the map, then it is nothing like Breath of the Wild.
Well, everything's marked on the map.
Yeah, literally everything.
Yeah.
Whoever's saying it's like Breath of the Wild is an idiot who hasn't played Breath of the Wild.
Well, I think it's a lot of recency bias. I think a lot
And
of people.
can I add real quick?
Mhm.
I haven't played Breath of the Wild, but I've seen some footage, and what stands out to me about Breath of the Wild, why I want to play it when I have the opportunity, is there's more interactivity. You can freeze objects, build their
Oh,
momentum, launch
absolutely.
them,
Yes.
like build little platforms and stuff like that. There's nothing like that in Infinite. You do not, the closest you come to anything like that is you can use the grappling hook to grapple off pine trees and swing yourself around. But you
Right.
can't like interact with the world. You can't burn those trees down. You can't run them over in a scorpion tank. Nothing like that.
No, it's all very, if it
Static.
weren't for the fact that you had a big map where you could theoretically choose how you go about these different points, this would be like as linear, if not more linear than the first level, well, the first real level of the first Halo. Like it's
Mhm.
there's really nothing that makes this that different. It's just kind of boring once you get past the first little bit. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter how good the shooting feels, for me at least, because you're just doing the same thing over and over. I mean,
Yeah.
I do not understand how Far Cry 6, which is a game I have no interest in to begin with, got like raked over the coals while Halo Infinite was praised to the high heavens when they, as far as I can tell, have a practically identical campaign.
Yeah.
Alas.
I'll say Infinite makes down to my honorable mentions as well for a lot of the same reasons. Mostly pertaining to the quality of the multiplayer, which, like you said,
Yep, good.
has its problems, but they're things you can make peace with, or they're things
Hmm.
that I at least feel pretty confident will be resolved. Stuff like server desync, tick rate, melee, stuff like that. Radar, vehicles, those are design decisions. Collision, friendly collision. stuff like that might get reworked. The monetization and how it infects every aspect of the game, that might get loosened up a little, but probably not. But the single player, you didn't beat it, and the reason I asked that wasn't because I don't think you can't pass judgment, because like you said,
Mhm.
3 hours in, you've seen everything this game has to offer. But the reason I ask is because the end of the game has a couple I don't want to say twists, but maybe like disappointments that I feel should probably be called out in particular. So when you load up the game and you open the tac map and you zoom out, keep in mind about 1/3 of that territory is inaccessible. It's just on the map for decoration, and you
Oh,
never are
okay.
allowed to go there. Yeah,
Wow, really?
yeah.
I wonder if that's why the other day I was exploring and I couldn't get to one part of the map.
You can't even fly there with a flying vehicle. It's just not allowed. 2, the story ends on a cliffhanger.
Oh boy, that's a risky.
Well, they did that with Halo 5, and we saw how that worked out.
Yeah, it's a total buy our DLC cliffhanger too, which is particularly scummy given that the story you do experience is extremely, extremely similar to Halo CE in a Force Awakens kind of way. A human ship is destroyed over a Halo ring. You are stranded on the surface with some Marines. There's an alien coalition kind of hunting you down from a position of power, and an ancient evil awakens. Right? It's beat for beat very similar to Halo CE, except now the aliens lock you into rooms and make you listen to their rants about how cool they are and how badass they are. Okay, so to end that on a cliffhanger is so disappointing, because not only is the story extremely predictable and doesn't really go anywhere new,
And bad.
it just kind of like ends. It just kind of ends. Think about like Halo CE. You play the level where you escape from the flood, okay? And you play through the library, and then that's the last level. That's pretty much what you get. Not in terms of, the last level isn't as bad as the library. That's not what I mean. But just kind of like climactically, imagine you'd never go back to the Pillar of Autumn and detonate the reactor, right? That's kind of what you get in Infinite. And then there's a cutscene that basically just shows the Flood are waking up, and they're going to be a bigger problem. What gives? And finally, I just want to note what my what might be my biggest disappointment with Halo Infinite, at least among the things that you didn't really mention, Justin, is this is a 10-year game, quote unquote, right? They've got the 10-year plan for this game. This is the template for Halo for the next decade. This game already feels 10 years old. When you're moving through this open world, this already feels really similar to Far Cry or Skyrim or a game from that era, which was 10 years
Yeah.
ago now.
It feels like, we've had so many good open world games. Well, we've had a few really good open world games in the past few years.
Mhm.
Breath of the Wild, and God forbid, even something like Horizon feels a little more modern than this.
Yeah, yeah,
But I don't know, man. Like I was pretty ready to put this game on my list, and then it just kind of sunk for me. But I kept the multiplayer installed because I like the multiplayer.
yeah,
So I guess there's that.
yeah. I did the same thing. I uninstalled the campaign.
The first multiplayer in a very long time that I've enjoyed. So
Mhm.
I'm obviously good on them for that. But in terms of campaign, I like Halo 4 better.
It's nice to see actual criticism on this game instead of just like breathless, like this game's so great. So
Give
thank
it a
you.
year.
Yeah, yeah.
Give it a year.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think you're right. I think give it a year, and people will be
I mean, this game came
significantly more
out
cynical.
December 8th,
Yeah,
and these websites were turning out awards a week
the next
later,
day.
basically, right? So they were a lot of these people, I assume, like me, hadn't played that much of it and had a much more glowing impression. And I think as the year goes on and more people give it a try, I think the multiplayer part is only going to get better. I think as they add maps, that's going to turn into a pretty solid offering. But it's free. I think the campaign, I can't see, unless the DLC makes some dramatic freaking changes, I cannot see this being any better a year from now. And removed from the hype, it'll be like, oh boy, I guess this is like Far Cry 3 again, isn't it, guys?
Yeah. I mean, we were texting after I beat the campaign, and you were, I guess, probably on hour 2 based on what you were talking about. And I was really surprised when you said you can't put the game down because I was so much further along in the journey where I realized how much this game just kind of loses its steam, loses its momentum. And I guess at the time I didn't really realize exactly where you were at. But
early.
I think that you and I, we were in the the hyperbaric time chamber from DBZ. Where we played this game or we experienced, right, kind of the Halo Infinite cycle at 200 times the speed of like a normal game journalist, right?
Yes.
We've gone through the cycle. We've completed the great journey on this one.
This was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Well, I still have it installed. I would like to play it at some point, but I've just discovered that maybe Halo isn't for me because I've been playing Halo Combat Evolved a little bit sometimes when I'm in the queue for FF14, and I made it to like mission 6. I think it's Guilty Spark 636 or whatever.
343.
Whatever. 343.
Oh yeah, of course. There's a studio. I don't really want to play anymore. I think I'm good. I think I got my fix. So.
Well, you're crazy, but it's okay.
Well, I had fun with what I played, but
I know. I'm kidding. I think you're not a shooter person.
Yeah.
And neither am I really, but Halo's, you played it before.
Yeah, I've beat it before, but I think if I played it multiplayer, maybe I could force my way through. But
I think if you don't have a lot of nostalgia, CE can be kind of difficult to get through. I realize the true Halo fans are going to crucify me for this, but as much as I love CE, it doesn't have the same kind of like driving forward momentum that 2 and 3 do. So I can definitely understand kind of losing your way on that one.
But we'll see. I mean, if I get bored, I might finish the fight, so to speak.
Well, I'll go ahead and do my number 5 since Halo, as it has done recently, sucked all the oxygen out. Well, my number 5 is 12 minutes. I think I'm the only person left alive that likes this game. I'm pretty sure the guy who developed it hates this game now because this game got a giant hit piece published about how he's a big sexist asshole, which is only based on the game, for the record. It's not based on any real life things. It's just based on the game.
By who wrote it?
Kotaku.
Of course.
And I think a lot of that criticism is unfair. So in honor of 12 minutes being a widely hated game, I will just quickly rebuttal against the 2 most common things I've heard about used against it. The first, which I already mentioned, is that the game was labeled as problematic for a few reasons. One reason being that it is a time loop game in which some of the puzzle solving involves drugging and /or murdering your wife. I can see why that really raises some eyebrows with people, but I will say I think that the game creates an interesting ethical dilemma for your main character who's stuck in this endless 12-minute loop and is willing to do anything to get out. And when you first do the drugging, you don't have to murder your wife. You don't have to do that. So if you did that, it's on you. But drugging your wife, you do many times because it's one of the main ways you can access some of the conversations with the intruder into your apartment. And with the first time you do it, it feels really messed up. And then you just kind of, eventually it becomes such a mechanical thing. And I think that's kind of the point. Like you're experiencing your character's slow deterioration as they like, oh shit, well, I guess I just got to keep drugging her. And at some point you just become so desensitized to it. And I felt like that was a pretty cool way to handle that. I do not think that was the game giving tacit permission to people to drug their wife, but I suppose if that's how you wish to read into it, that's your prerogative.
You could read into the movie Groundhog Day as incredibly like abusive if you wanted to look at it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a core theme of a lot of time travel stories is, the consequences of your actions being erased doesn't necessarily erase your own guilt at having done them, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty messed up, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And this game is pretty messed up. The other thing that was labeled as problematic is the fact that you murdered your father and had sex with your sister, which I think is, one, hilarious, and two, not that problematic. But that's just me. Not endorsing incest, mind you.
Again, I would like to point out we do not have a sister.
I'm saying, yes. I am having a daughter.
Oh no.
but I do not think that it is a plot point that is beyond the realm of possible inclusion. We're only a few years removed from Game of Thrones having a major incestuous relationship that lasted through the entire series. And many people were fine with that. So I don't think that this game having a main character who, and this is a quote from the game, "You murdered your father and had sex with your sister." I don't think that's beyond the pale. The other common complaint is that it's a time loop game that isn't very fun because you have to repeat a lot of things over and over. Now, I think that's kind of a funny thing to say because it is a time loop game. So it's kind of inherent how it works. My other contention would be that if that's how you played it, then a few things. One, you didn't get very far. And two, you just don't like games where you have to pay attention. So I'm sorry that that's how you feel. But if you pay attention to that game, it does introduce many ways to speed up interactions you've already had. You can hide in the closet to fast forward to when the guy breaks into your house. You can leave your apartment to automatically end your time loop if you realize it's going nowhere. You can kill yourself if you realize that your time loop is going nowhere. You can fast forward every dialogue choice that you've already experienced. So the idea that you can't, that it's inconvenient because you have to do these things over and over again, I think misses the point, and I don't think is a fair complaint. And again, if you really got stuck on one certain area, I would posit that perhaps you should put your phone down and look at the screen, because the game isn't that hard to figure out if you're paying attention, which I know is asking a lot from the types of people who might put Halo Infinite number 3 on a top 50 game of the year list.
Cheston shooting from the hip at the Zoomers here.
I feel very annoyed that anytime this game is mentioned, even when it was nominated for a Game Award, the conversation is always, well, that game's a pile of shit. I hate it. Or, oh, it's just, you have to redo things again. It's so boring. I heard the same stuff about Deathloop, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. So
yeah.
I will rest my case on 12 minutes and say that though the game has one of the dumbest stories ever, the moments of discovery are way worth it. And if you're willing to stop shoving popcorn in your face and put your phone down, to borrow from Red Letter Media, then perhaps you would see something you like in it.
Well, to me, from other people, I've always gathered that 12 minutes is one of those games you're supposed to hate. Like, it's almost a meme.
Sorry, every time loop game can't be like Overboard, which right. I do want to play. But, there's different types of games.
Or Outer... Yeah, I mean, just real quick, before we get too sidetracked, I'm going to say...
Outer Wilds guides you a lot less, and I like Outer Wilds, but if people complain about 12 minutes making you lost and feel like you're doing the same thing over and over, then where the hell did they figure out Outer Wilds?
That's exactly what I was going to say about Outer Wilds. That was the whole point of the game, I felt like, doing
that
stuff
game
repeatedly.
Is way freaking harder, and I know the same people love that game. I don't get it.
Yeah, and for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and say the concept of the time loop genre that has emerged over the past month, if not week, is completely absurd.
Worst trend.
Time loop is not a genre.
Oh, it's a great trend, but calling it a genre is a weird trend.
Yeah.
I love time loop games. I'm fine with it. When executed well, it's super fun.
Yeah, generally I don't like time travel stories, but I think that they can be done well. But that's not a genre.
No, it's not. It's silly. But I should defer. So whoever's next, Derek.
Well, Setzer, why don't you get us going with your honorable mention / number 5?
Sure. So my honorable mentions, we already talked a lot about Halo Infinite and why it doesn't make the top 5 list. I'm gonna say for my honorable mentions, I replayed Prey this year. Prey 2017 from Arcane. That game is and remains a masterpiece, but this wasn't the first year I played it, so not quite there for the list. If we had done this podcast a few years ago, Prey would have been on the number 1 slot that year. Death of the Outsider, Dishonored 2, Death of the Outsider. I am playing through this for the first time right now, courtesy of my $1 Game Pass subscription that got me Halo Infinite. I didn't play this when it came out because, it also suffered from atrocious PC performance, and I played Dishonored 2 on my PS4 and really didn't like playing that game with a controller. So Death of the Outsider just fell through the cracks, and I am loving it. But I haven't finished it, so no top 5. Jedi Fallen Order. I played this a couple years ago and replayed it again over the last week or so just because.
Great game.
Yeah, and it's a great game. It's, I originally played it at launch, October 2019, I want to say. And, that was a pretty bad time for me. I just got laid off work. And, I got this game in the red box for cheap and had a great time playing it.
Yeah, I played it this year. I loved it. I famously played it right before it got the Series X patch, even. So it's a great game.
And it's even better than when I originally played it. It's much more stable, and I'm playing on PC, so it looks much better. Frame rate's much better, which are very much appreciated improvements in an action game. So, and also, it can't be understated just how well Respawn nailed the Star Wars aesthetic. So, big thumbs up for this game, but already played it, so I don't really want to put it on Game of the Year. Similarly, Titanfall 2, also from Respawn. Big fan of mech games, as you guys know. And this is just a supremely good game all around. I've played this game many, many times, and it's not going on the Game of the Year list for the year I played it for the 5th time. Finally, for honorable mentions, HROT, HROT. This is an indie boomer shooter. Basically, yeah, HROT. This is basically Dusk in Soviet Russia, and it's still in early access. So I only got to play the first episode earlier this year, but I greatly enjoyed it. So big ups to HROT. Here's hoping you develop into a wonderful finished game.
Here's hoping.
And number 5, before we get into my top 5, I am going to say I did not have the chance to play a ton of games this year, so figuring out the bottom of this list was very difficult for me because of the games I did play. Very few of them really stood out in a game of the year kind of way. But number 5 this year, I think, is going to be Journey.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good game.
It's a good game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this came out, 10 years ago or something now?
Something like that, yeah.
And I did not have a PlayStation 3 at the time, so I never played it.
Nobody did except me.
Yeah. And I noticed it was on sale and figured I'd give it a shot, and I ended up really liking it. I think it has a really charming art style and world design aesthetic, kind of a mystical vibe without being, World of Warcraft, Paulgen core bullshit. So I really appreciated that. The gameplay is very simplistic, but this game has the good sense not to overstay its welcome. So I don't mind simple gameplay at all in small doses.
It's one of those that advocates for art style over graphic fidelity, I think. Because if this game was released this year, I would not have batted an eye. Like, it looks like something that could come out this year.
And, I think the social elements of this game still stand out even today. Not a whole lot of games have the same kind of like anonymous cooperation aspect. I think a lot of games that have any kind of like anonymous online play like this or interaction are typically much more competitive in nature.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So it was refreshing to just see someone playing the game and feel excited to, go mess with them as opposed to try to hunt them down and kill them.
It's a great game.
Yeah, number 5 is Journey.
This year was hard for me to figure out a top 5 because I've played a bunch of shit and a bunch of good things at that. A bunch of games I'm going to list actually were on the top 5 at some point in my writing process, but they were bumped off for various reasons. So I will go over them briefly. So first up is Nier Replicant. It's a very solid game. It kind of plays but the story and the music and everything around it is so good. Ultimately, I bumped it off because it is a remake / remaster of like a 10-year-old game, and I feel if since this is a 2021 specific list, I felt like that wouldn't hang. So that is the main reason it gets bumped off. Bravely Default 2 is another one. It's just it's a really good game, but ultimately it just didn't hang with the rest. Monster Hunter Rise. I loved my time with this game. It was like a lot of fun. It takes a lot to get me to play a multiplayer game, and this like had me pretty hooked for a while. If it had been finished when it came out, it might be on the top 5, but it wasn't. So ultimately, that's what it gets punished for. Neo: The World Ends With You. Square making a sequel to a niche DS game in 2021 is pretty crazy. So I certainly respect that. This game was criminally underrated. Like, it got no representation at the Game Awards, for instance, but it deserved at least like nominations for music and narrative and all sorts of fun stuff. I can't recommend Neo: The World With You enough. Disgaea 6 originally was on the list, but it got bumped off. Ultimately, I feel like this game is lazy for the following reasons. It cuts out a ton of classes, and some of them may seem superfluous, but they're not. It's just nice to have all sorts of variety. They cut out a bunch of attack animations. It feels like they're switching to a new art style, made them trim a bunch of the fat that didn't need to be trimmed. And ultimately, I thought to myself, if I were to replay Disgaea, would I replay Disgaea 6? And the answer is no. I would play 5. I will probably never play 6 again, despite enjoying my time with it. So that is why it is being bumped. And also, like, my playtime for it is huge. I think it was over 200 hours this year. But a lot of that was idle time. I was not actively playing it. I had, like, set my people to do their own tasks and automated my gameplay. So it's really good, but ultimately it just didn't make it. And my last honorable mention is Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. I finished it last night. I loved every minute of it, and it made it as high as I think 2 on this list before ultimately taking it down to the honorable mentions. It shows you how loaded this year has been, for me anyway. The reason I'm bumping it down is just because of the wait times, quite frankly. Yesterday, I got into the queue at 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and I got out of it at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, which is inexcusable, I think. I played Burning Crusade at launch, and I never experienced anything like this, ever. But when you get into the game, and the fact I'm willing to put up with those waits and enjoy myself, it says a lot about the quality, I think. Because when you get in, it's great. It's like it plays well. There's no like weird glitches. You don't like notice the crazy server load. Like I looked at this as kind of the equivalent to Burning Crusade in importance for this game. Like, it needed to be a hit because Shadowbringers got super popular. And it's funny because I actually considered Heavensward the original Burning Crusade, but but Shadowbringers became so popular that this is almost like the second version of that, like Burning Crusade 2.0. And I think whenever server condition calms down, this is a bona fide hit. I think the main story quest is really awesome. Like, I like just basically everything it does, but it needs to get its shit together, and I can't really recommend someone get into it and wait hours to play a game. Like, I just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you get there, Setzer, you will love it.
When it comes to JRPGs, Derek, you are one of 2 serpent heads that pour honey in my ears. So
Yes.
you and my buddy Phil are both in agreement that Endwalker is extremely good. And when that happens, when those two stars align, that's, the sign to me. And yeah, I anticipated putting Endwalker on my Game of the Year list until the queues started, and I decided I'm not playing till January. So
It's so bad that they're suspending sales. They're suspending ad campaigns. I have literally never seen anything like this before.
Yoshi P is crying.
Yes,
yeah,
he's
crying on stream.
like it's insane. So I think probably at the end of next year, I will be like, well, FF14 was probably actually the best game of last year, but
Hmm.
that's just the way it is, man. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's a good problem to have.
it is. Well, the thing is, at the end of the day, if I want to play a game, I want to play it when I want to play it. I don't want to play it
Yeah.
5 hours after I'm trying. Like, when I finally got through the queue yesterday, I was playing Mario Party with my wife, and I'm like, I'm not going to quit playing games to go play a different game. It's just silly. So that's just how it goes, I'm afraid.
Yep.
On to number 5. My number 5 this year is Lost Judgment. When I first played it, I thought it was going to be potentially a number 1, but it ultimately I decided not to because I don't know. There's no good reason. I just think there's 4 that are better.
Yeah. Hey, fair enough, man.
Yeah. Like I pretty much enjoy everything about this game. Like if you want to like mainline the story, you can, but there are a ton of like side diversions that alter the gameplay significantly. Like there's like rhythm game sections, there's like dating game sections. You can go to the arcade, you can join the esports club and play like Virtua Fighter. Like there's all sorts of shit you can do, and it's all fun. Like it does not feel filler content. Like they really flesh out their side quests. Like it feels like you're missing part of the world if you don't play them. But if you just selected to play the main content, that's okay too, because the main story is very great. I think this game might have gotten a little flack for some story choices they make, which I don't think is fair. I remember reading the Game Informer review, which I think gave it a 7 out of 10 or something that I thought was criminally low for something I liked this much. And the main reason they said it was because like a main plot point is that a woman lies about getting assaulted. So people were like in the Me Too era, you can't do that. And I think running away from such story elements is cowardly because that does happen. It's not like ideal to think about, but it does. So I think all stories like going away from such plot points is short-sighted. So I think that criticism is unfair.
Or maybe the demand that no artist ever portray that.
Well, yes, Western journalists need to realize not everyone has our same cultural values.
Well, good luck.
Good luck indeed. But Judgment has become the new Yakuza for
Really?
When I say that, I mean like how the game plays.
Mm.
Like it plays like the old Yakuza used to. The new going forward, Yakuza is going to play like a dragon, which is a simplistic JRPG sort of thing, which is fine. But I think it's great, so I recommend it, and it is my number 5. So unless anyone had anything else, I guess Cheston, you can get on for your number 4.
My number 4 is Mario Party Superstars.
That should have been an honorable mention. Thank you for mentioning it.
There's really not that much to say about this game because it is the way they advertise it as a throwback to classic Mario Party with new graphics is exactly what it is. They nailed every aspect of that. The only thing they didn't nail is the number of maps. But everything else, even the things you thought they would screw up, like online play, they actually totally got right. Not only did they get it right, like they even did things I wouldn't have thought they would have done, like the fact that it saves in between turns. So if you do get disconnected, it's actually pretty easy to get back into it with the same exact people once the internet issue is resolved, which I've only had to do once because other than that, it has been pretty smooth.
They overcame the odds and made a Mario Party game I have very few qualms with. I feel like there's usually like 1 or 2 issues I take with each one that comes out. Like, Mario Party 100 for the DS. Obviously, one big problem was on the DS. But it had no boards. Super Mario Party, I didn't like that they like made the boards really small and that the stars were like 10 coins each. I felt like that simplified gameplay too much. This is just like the only problem I have is some of the game choices. Outside of that, it's just like the ideal Mario Party.
Yeah, and I've played with a lot of different people. This has been the definitive social game for me, probably ever. Just for all the different people it's brought together. And we used to play Mario Party a lot. And then, of course, we all went our separate ways and moved around the country. Some of us in the same geographic location, but nonetheless, we moved all around, and having the ability to play these Mario Party games with some of my friends. The other night, playing with someone I hadn't talked to in 10 years. This has been a pretty special game for me personally, and I don't have much negative to say about it other than the maps. I think it's beautiful. I think it plays great, and I have enjoyed connecting with a whole bunch of friends over this game throughout the months since it's been out.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think you do a good choice.
Yes, and Setzer, I know you don't love Mario Party, but when you get a Switch, you gotta hook yourself up.
I enjoy playing Mario Party with you guys, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a
Yeah,
fiend
exactly.
for it like you are. And I want to say, I'm really pleasantly surprised to hear you be so bullish on this game. As much as I enjoy, like, ironically shitting on Nintendo games that I don't even play, I'm really pleasantly surprised to hear you guys have something nice to say about Mario Party because, as much as we've all played it together and as much as you guys have played it, without my involvement, right? I tend to get the Mario Party complaints department feed out of you guys.
Yes.
Not in a bad way, but in the way that demonstrates you guys' passion for Mario Party. We'll say they're the kind of complaints that fans make, or people who really want to love it make. And I'm really
Yeah, they nailed it.
I'm glad to hear it.
Took long enough.
It's one of the rarest things ever. They messed this up. They messed this up once with Mario Party 100, and you thought you very rarely get a second chance in the games industry, and they did, and they
nailed it.
They took it to the house. So that's my number 4. So Setzer, on to you.
So my number 4 this year is going to be Tyranny by Obsidian. I really enjoyed this game. This is not a perfect game by any stretch, but I think it is a criminally underrated game. Having played it in 2021, I have the benefit of seeing maybe how this game was received and how little a splash it made in the years since its release. And I think that is just unfortunate, And there are ways in which other more recent CRPGs, especially Obsidian's own Pillars of Eternity, are better. But there are also a lot of things that Tyranny gets right in ways that are maybe not as in fashion, not as fashionable within the genre, right? And I just really enjoyed this game. I think it has a more inventive setting than I expected, even if it doesn't 100% commit to a lot of its most interesting premises. I think that it doesn't outstay its welcome, except for the DLC. The DLC definitely outstays its welcome, but you're going to see why in another game that I don't really, let that sour my impression of the game as a whole. And yeah, overall, it's just a solid game. And my heart goes out to everyone who worked on Tyranny for making a really great game with limited resources and that nobody expected would make a splash when it really should have.
They did what they could with what they had.
Yeah. Well, it's Tyranny was kind of the B team game relative to Pillars of Eternity, and in some production quality aspects, you can kind of get that feeling. But overall, it's a really well designed game, and it's a lot of fun to play.
Well, there's something to be said about art's for adversity. There's one thing making like a great game with $1 billion budget, but when you got a bunch of obstacles and you still deliver, something to be said for that.
Yeah. Like I said, my heart goes out to the people who worked on this game, and they put in the work to make it happen.
The opposite of a Bethesda property.
Oh, we'll talk a little more about that contrast later in this list.
Oh, I knew Fallout 76 would appear on there somewhere.
Oh yeah. Spoiler alert.
Oh boy. So my number 4, and real quick, the problem with making these kind of lists is that I often forget things, and I just realized that It Takes Two did not appear on here. So I'd like to make a quick shout out to my another honorable mention I should have mentioned. It Takes Two is a lot of fun. I played with my wife. Like, it's a really solid platformer. It's got a really well done and touching story. I think it takes itself seriously when it needs to, but also is like lighthearted and goofy most of the time. And it's a real touching game. I think anyone that dislikes it is crazy. So I think it was a well-deserving winner at the VGAs, and I hope more people play it as a result. Just solid fun. I think anyone that's got a spouse should play it. It's just good stuff. But anyway, on to my number 4, Persona 5 Strikers. Going into 2021, it was my most anticipated game of the year because I'm into this genre now, and Persona 5 is one of my favorite games ever, so it's a match made in heaven, and ultimately it paid off. It was a very story-based one of these, which is very strange because I'm used to the story being kind of an afterthought, but this feels like a Persona game stuffed into a Muso, which is crazy. There's like so much story content that I feel like people that just play Persona won't be like, ugh, I can't believe that this spin-off game like is canon when it has nothing. Like, there's tons of dialogue, there's tons of story beats, there's all sorts of good stuff. Like, it's a perfect fusion that they should really be commended for pulling off. Anyone that played Persona 5 would be well served to at least give it a shot. I do not think it is for everyone, but at least look up like the story on YouTube because I think they did a really good job with it. They introduced like new Phantom Thieves, which I think fit in with the original group. And that's hard to do because I think that original group is pretty damn solid.
Mhm.
They don't make story decisions that are like, oh, we're bringing Akechi back because everyone loves him. Like, nope, he's not in the game at all, not mentioned. Like, it's, I don't know, really well done. The only complaint that I guess I have is that it doesn't really acknowledge Royal's existence. Like, Kasumi is not mentioned or in the game at all. So, but I feel like this game was in production before Royal even came out. So, what can you do? But yeah, that's really all I got to say. It's a really great game.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I loved P5 when I played it a couple years ago, and I keep meaning to play P5R. But typically, I think of Musos as kind of like shallow and repetitive button mashers. But you said that P5 Strikers is more like a Persona game shoved into a Muso. Do you mean that maybe it has some gameplay depth?
It has a little bit of gameplay depth. It takes like the weakness system for Persona 5 and pushes it in here.
Mhm.
So like some attacks won't work on certain enemies and some are super effective, that sort of thing. It's not like super deep or anything, but it does feel like a melding of the two. And it does have like a turn-based menu. Like if you press like I think triangle, you can bring up like your Persona menu and like cast spells or whatever. You can like cast I think buffs and you can heal your party. You can do all sorts of like RPG like turn-based mechanics in this Muso, which I think is really interesting. I had not seen it used like that before. So I still think you'll be like, this is kind of shallow, but compared to other Muso type games, I do think it is a little deeper than that. I would say at least like this is the sort of game that'll eventually go on sale for like $10.
Yeah.
So when it hits that price, I think you would be well served to try it.
Yeah.
But I think from a story perspective, at least, you will be very into it.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
And also, I should mention the music is all good. It's consistent with Persona 5's like consistent banger playlist. It holds up.
That alone makes me want to play it.
Yes, because as you know, Persona 5 soundtrack is pretty top notch. All right, so I think we're good on that. So Cheston, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Psychonauts 2.
Well, how about that? It's also my number 3.
You gonna collab?
Hey!
Yeah, might as well.
I think that Psychonauts 2 might be the most surprising game of all time for me. I didn't think it would be much more than okay after playing a little bit of Psychonauts 1, and it turned out that it was darn near perfect.
I think I'm on record on this podcast as saying I thought it was going to be a dumpster fire that people would
Yes.
mock relentlessly because it was been in development for about as long as Duke Nukem Forever, it feels like.
Yeah.
And in the first one, I felt like had a poorly aged sense of humor. So like this game is like lining up to be a trash fire.
But it wasn't. I think that it actually, I think the real strength of the game is a combination of very creative level design throughout. Like I have remembered pretty much every level because they're all just so different and also interesting, the ways that they touch on these different mental illnesses within these people in very creative ways. You know, they have the level that deals with alcoholism. That's like a bunch of it's a pirate story, and there's a bunch of bottles floating in this ocean. You know, and all the little figments are people vomiting after drinking profusely. You have the first level, which is like someone's addiction issues, and it's a big casino type level where you play through all these different casino games. You have the psychedelic level that we mentioned last week, where you're awakening the senses of this mind, and they're all kind of like that. They're all just really interesting, gorgeous to look at, and from a narrative perspective, they push the story forward both mechanically and with the cutscenes that happen therein. And as a game, I thought that the way it played, while not, necessarily perfect, certainly a huge marked improvement over the original game.
Agreed. And I think before we get too into the gameplay here, I think what's commendable about the story is like how it touches on these mental illnesses. It feels like they're handling it with like care and sensitivity and like some depth, as opposed to like I'm used to like surface level, like everyone suffers from depression and stuff, but it goes kind of deep into that, and I appreciated that. It didn't feel like
it's one
they
of
were
the
surfing for backpats. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's one of the only games that starts with a disclaimer that I felt like actually earned it.
Yes.
Like, Assassin's Creed always starts with the disclaimer that this is made by a lot of people from various ethnicities and religions. Yeah, well, they all have a weirdly similar perspective. But when you play this game, and it's like, this game is, about mental illness, and, it has a lot of different things about that. Like, these issues are serious, and this game is about healing and all that. And then as I played, I was like, yeah, that actually reflects the disclaimer
It
pretty
does
well.
not joke about its stuff. Like
Nope.
there are jokes in the game. It is like a lighthearted comedy in places, but it knows when to be serious. Like you don't have
And it doesn't undercut it with weird
yes,
jokes.
They don't cut the tension.
For no
They don't
reason.
cut the tension for no reason. They if they want you to feel a certain way, they make sure you do that. And then when it's time to move on, they move on. I respect it.
It isn't a big claim to say that it's one of the best it's probably the best platformer story I've ever played. But I would say for what it's going for, I can't think of many games that have done as well narratively.
Well, yeah,
because I genuinely do just think it's a well-written
yeah.
game.
Outside of like games where the whole point of it is like the writing, like Disco Elysium or Planescape Torment. Well, outside of those kind of games, I think that the writing is like as good as you can get out of this industry. I left feeling very impressed, and I wanted to really hate this game, so I gotta applaud it. It overcame the odds.
I wanted to like it, and I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too.
It was. I should say that every single game from here on out was at one point my number one, and has at one point been my number one in the past few weeks. So
Same.
These are all pretty solid.
I was convinced this would be your number one, so I am surprised.
Yeah, I was pretty close. I feel very strongly about this game, and much like last year's number 3 for me, Ori, it was snubbed at the Game Awards. So it's just how it
was
goes.
Completely snubbed. I mean, look, I'll say it again, but I haven't played Guardians of the Galaxy, but I find it very hard to believe that a Marvel game has a better story than
I'm
Psychonauts.
sure it's fun.
Yes, I'm sure it's acceptable, but it's a Marvel story.
I'm sure I want to play it. I will play that game and I'll report back to you, but I have no expectations that it'll be better than Psychonauts on a narrative.
If it is,
level.
I'll admit it, but I would doubt it. All right, so Setzer, what's your number 3?
Well, number 3 is where this list really kind of came together for me. I knew that the top 3 games of this year were going to be the top 3 games, and I kind of had an idea of what order they'd go in as soon as I beat them all. So number 3 for me in 2021, that's going to be Doom Eternal.
All right.
Yeah, this was a late 2020 release. I didn't play it until it went on sale here in 2021. and I really enjoyed it. This is a game I expected to enjoy, and lo and behold, I did indeed enjoy. And I will say, I probably wouldn't have played this game unless you, Derek, had suggested I play Doom 2016, which I had not played for a couple years. I think I played that back in 2019.
Something like that.
Yeah. And I don't really have, unlike a lot of, PC gamers, I don't have a lot of nostalgia for Doom, for the older Doom games. So, Doom 2016, much like the new Wolfenstein games, just didn't really stand out to me.
Right.
But you suggested I play it, and I ended up really liking that game. And that got me really excited for Doom Eternal.
Now, for the record, everyone here knows I'm not a shooter guy.
Yeah.
But I think Doom 2016 is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like, I love that game. Everything about it is damn near perfect.
Mhm.
I actually bought Eternal last year for $30. I still haven't played it, but God, like Doom 2016, I think is about as close to perfect for a campaign as you can get. There's no fat. It's all great.
Yeah.
Superbly well made.
Yes. And I think Doom Eternal is really interesting as a sequel because there are things that I too regard Doom 2016 to be a very, very well made game. And there are things that I think Doom Eternal does just it takes what was in 2016 and just supercharges it to the extreme in a way that I think is just totally sublime. And I really want to see in more shooters going forward. But there are also things that feel like a regression from Doom 2016. Namely, I'm not a huge fan of the changes made to Doom Eternal's art style. I think that is kind of
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate bright colors or anything like that, but
You weren't writing Blizzard when Diablo 3 was coming out.
Yeah.
Like, this is too bright.
Yeah, I wasn't photoshopping my own Diablo 3 edits.
Blizzard, hire this man.
But I do think that Doom 2016 was more atmospheric in its gameplay, and similarly, I think Doom Eternal's lore and story, and especially its storytelling, are so over the top. I think it's John Carmack who famously said story in games is kind of like story in porno. And Doom 2016, kind of took that to heart, where every half hour you get a 5-second animation of the Doom guy punching a computer, and someone walks in your ear while you play the level, right?
Which Halo Infinite tries to crib, and I will add, doesn't work nearly as well with Chief as it does.
Yeah. I mean, I
Doom
didn't
guy.
mind that aspect of Infinite, but Infinite I think is actually more similar to Eternal in that Eternal has one of my pet peeves in games, first-person games, which is during a cutscene, it zooms the camera out into a non-gameplay perspective, and the character does kind of stand around and talk, because I think the designers will know it'll be boring to see what's happening in first person, which kind of to me raises the question of like, why do we need this scene then, right? If it's boring. And Doom Eternal, has the Doom guy talk, which I think is very stupid. And it has like a bunch of Haldron Core medieval dimension stuff, which I think is just kind of take it or leave it, But where Doom Eternal shines is the gameplay, which, like I said earlier,
Not a surprise.
yeah, it takes 2016 and it just, puts the pedal to the metal and just supercharges it. I absolutely love what ended up being a surprisingly controversial aspect of the game, which is that certain weapons are more effective against certain enemies. I really liked having to learn how best to deal with different enemy types, and swapping into the weapons and getting into that rhythm, using the flamethrower versus the blood punch versus the chainsaw versus just a normal takedown, and the rhythm between all of those different resources and how they flow together. That alone, I think, needs to be in more games because it is such a cool rhythm. And the music in Doom Eternal is also very, very good. I know that was also
Another
kinda
unsurprising.
yeah. Well, that was kinda controversial because it is, something of a departure from 2016, it's a little more synthy and a little less metal. It's not such a huge departure to my mind, my ears, that it should have been as controversial as it was.
Well, hardcore Doom people love their metal.
Yeah, apparently. And yeah, I can't wait to play the DLC for this game. It's sitting in my backlog, and it's probably the next thing I'm gonna play. Once my Game Pass sub expires, of course.
Yes. Your dollar Game Pass sub that lets you play Halo Infinite.
Mhm.
I guess it's my turn. My number 3 is Psychonauts 2. There's not much really to say about that, other than what we've talked about. So real quick, I'll talk about a couple games that didn't make my honorable mentions or my list. Resident Evil Village was okay. I think people might overrate that game a little bit, but I enjoyed my time with it. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. We talked about that a little bit last week, but it's one of those things where I think it's just a very good game that people are overrating because there's nothing to play on the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, it's a good remake of a PS3 game.
Yes, exactly. As Cheston got the nail on the head in his little joke last week, that this feels like a remake, but it's not. Like,
Mhm.
I can't really pinpoint what's unique about it.
Might as well be.
Yeah. The new Pokemon Snap. I now I enjoyed that game pretty well. Ultimately, like, I find the original Pokemon Snap to be infinitely replayable, and this one I, for whatever reason, don't get the same feeling out of. I can't
Yeah,
quite.
maybe it's not good.
I don't agree with that, but I can't quite pinpoint why I don't feel that way. Maybe it's because I can't throw pester balls at Pokemon and like annoy them anymore. That's kind of lame, but I don't know. There was just something about it that wasn't as good as the original. But I'm glad they made it, regardless. I see like some people put in like hundreds of hours into it. I'm like, how is that even possible? I really don't know how you couldn't get tired of that game after like 15 or so. But more power to you, I suppose. Tales of Arise. Ultimately, I felt like that game it's really solid. It's probably the best Tales of game ever made. But I felt that the EXP system was designed to encourage you to get microtransactions, more so than any other game that might have had that. Because like EXP gain is really slow, like terribly slow, and I felt like it was so grindy that it was like kind of nudging you to buy, like, if you get this item, you get 100% EXP bonus, and I don't know, I couldn't escape that feeling. The bosses were so damage spongy that I felt like you were under leveled unless you did that. So I don't know about that, but other than that, though, it was the best Tales game. So that's saying something. As a franchise, I don't really hold much respect for. So,
Yeah.
but I
We
do,
know.
but I do think it's overrated by people. I've seen a lot of people say it's a Game of the Year contender, and I really don't think it hangs with a lot of the other high top tier RPGs I've played this year. So I don't know but that'll do it for my brief little window and stuff that didn't make it. So, Cheston, what's your number 2?
My number two is probably your number two. My number 2 is Metroid Dread.
I'm surprised it's your number 2.
Metroid Dread is the second most surprising game of the year behind Psychonauts 2. It is a game developed by Mercury Steam, who last developed a remake of Metroid 2 that people kind of liked. And their follow up is a game that everybody seems to like a whole lot, including me. I think that Dread feels like to me a logical evolution of a Super Nintendo game with modern technology. So it plays as sharply as a Golden Age two-dimensional action game, but it looks more like a modern game, of course. And I really just thought it was about perfect. Really, the only complaint I could register is that the music isn't great overall, but it's not bad.
Yeah, the music's fine. When they played the little melody at the Game of the Year awards, like, that's excellent.
They didn't use Dread because Dread music's forgettable.
The Dread
But-
music, I don't know. Like, I feel like it goes for like the atmospheric sort of music a lot of games have, which is fine, but it's not particularly memorable.
It makes sense for Metroid as well. But I mean, it is such a solid action game, and it just gets better and better. Every boss fight I found to be extremely satisfying once you figured out your way around it, particularly the final boss fight,
Yeah.
which even with every single upgrade, I died several times, which isn't how it would have gone in old Metroids. Once I figured out the timing and the reversal windows, and I made that guy so mad he ripped his wing off, it was like, man, this is pretty darn perfect.
I feel like in a lot of modern games, you're expected when you get to a boss, you just like beat them and move on.
And
But this one, it really felt like you needed to learn the fights and figure them out and then beat them from there. It was kind of cool.
the game has no problem handing an ass to you.
Yeah.
No problem. And I should also add, I think this is really important. I played a lot of games to completion this year. I do not know what overtook me. It's bad, and I wish it would stop.
Not like you.
It made my Skyward Sword playthrough interminable. And for this game, though, it wasn't something I did out of obligation like it has been for others. It is a game I 100%ed, and I just genuinely did not want it to stop. I wanted to continue playing as long as I could and keep playing through all of the wonderful puzzles and keep playing through, experiencing all the different little secrets the game had to hide. I just thought it was a pretty perfect game.
Yeah, I didn't think I would go 100% when I played it myself, but it just hooked me. I was like, I gotta get everything. It's a lot of fun to go explore these old areas.
Yeah.
They made a Super Nintendo game in 2021. That's really all I can say about it. It feels like it, for perspective, like if you look at like the best games of all time lists, almost universally, Super Metroid is in the top 10, usually in the top 3. And I think this game hangs with Super Metroid. It's impressive how good this game is.
It's close. It's close. I played Super Metroid right after finishing this, and I will say it's, to me, in my mind, they're pretty close. And it really comes down to a preference between action and exploration. So you can't go wrong with either.
If someone told me this was their favorite game ever, I would not begrudge them for it. And that says a lot.
It is the best game on the Switch, I think, and that is saying something because Breath of the Wild is a Switch game, and that game is just about as good as it gets.
Yeah, there aren't really many faults. It's not even like fall prey to the Nintendo meme of this year of releasing unfinished games. Like this game is finished, it's a complete product.
No, it's complete. It is complete. There's no DLC.
There's no fat.
Doesn't
It's all great. I'm glad that they didn't like bloat it out with like crappy cutscenes or something. Like it's exactly as long as it needs to be.
So easy choice for me to make the list. Hard not to give it the first spot, but my first spot felt like it had to be what it is.
Clubhouse games.
Gotta be Clubhouse games again. Gotta go for it. Back to back.
The repeat champ. All right, Setzer, what's your number 2? I think I know, but we'll see if you surprise me.
So you guys are gonna hate me, but Fallout New Vegas is number 2.
I thought you were gonna say Fallout 76.
No, different Fallout. Yeah, I mean, I think Fallout New Vegas. I've talked a lot about this game over this year because I played it very early on, and it set the bar very, very high for the rest of the year.
I've said it before, but it makes me jealous that this is the first time you got to experience it. Like this is one of those like you want to experience again for the first time sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
A couple years ago, Cheston had watched an episode of The Simpsons for the first time. It was like when Bart went to Australia.
It was Bart versus Australia. I had never seen it, and I was like, God, this is the funniest damn thing I've ever seen.
And I had the same feeling when you said you were playing New Vegas for the first time. I was like, my goodness, you're playing a total classic, going in blind. It's. I was jealous.
Yeah, and I really truly did go in blind on this because I ignored Fallout for a very long time. I don't tend to like super silly kind of worlds, which that was to me Fallout. Fallout 2 came out when I was in kindergarten or something, so I really missed the boat on that franchise. And by the time Fallout 3 rolled around, I was in high school, and the only guy I knew who was like into Fallout at the time told me Fallout 3 was cool because you can blow up cities for no reason, which didn't really do much for me.
No.
And kind of reinforced my thinking that this is just a haha wacky kind of franchise, right? So when New Vegas came out, I wasn't really, I didn't pay it any mind. And I think that, that was a mistake, but not the kind of mistake I can be blamed for, right?
No, you cannot be blamed for that.
In the 10 years since, in the decades since that game, really my only exposure to it was jokes about the Legion versus NCR that I had been exposed to on the internet that I didn't really understand. So yeah, I went in more or less blind. And I think what enticed me into New Vegas more than any other factor is I love the Wild West. That's why I live out there now. I just fell in love with how New Vegas kind of incorporates a lot of that atmosphere and theme in a totally novel way that is evocative of some of the things I love about westerns, but recontextualized in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, right? One of the reasons I love the original Cowboy Bebop, and that hooked me. That told me that even in Good Springs, right? I think I got out of Good Springs, and that was what hooked me into thinking, okay, I need to give this game space, right, to breathe, and I need to take it seriously.
You do, yeah.
This is a blessing and a curse for New Vegas, but I ended up using a ton of mods, which I realize that's also going to be controversial. But I, based on what I played early on, I thought the game was way too easy. So, I downloaded some survival mode mods and just generally made it more difficult and more I don't want to say realistic, but maybe verisimilitudinous. I think that sealed the deal. Was not only was I coming into this experience that clearly has a lot of reverence for some of my favorite genres and even some of my least favorite genres because I really dislike post-apocalyptic stuff generally speaking.
It's overdone.
Yeah, and I think it's overly cynical in a really uninteresting way. It's also catered to me, catered to my gameplay preferences as well. It took a feat of engineering on my part to create that, and it wasn't exactly a catered experience. But when I got it working and got my momentum up, I mean that is a game that would not let me go. And I probably played New Vegas more than I played any other game this year. Yeah, I mean, what more can be said? It's just such a sublime game. It has its faults, nothing's perfect, but I think if you can find something special in it in the same ways that I did, you can acknowledge those faults and look past them. And on top of that, DLC, 2 out of 3, not bad.
Yeah, not bad.
Dead Money is probably one of the low points of gaming for me this year.
It sucks. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah, I can't express how much I really came away loathing Dead Money. Just hated playing it, and when I tried to look up, with the benefit of a decade of hindsight, why is this so bad? And digging up some developer comments, I think that made me hate it even more. So, my advice for you, listener who has not played Fallout New Vegas, all 0.35 of you, skip Dead Money and don't be afraid to tweak the game into something that you'll fall in love with.
I mean, you're right on about Dead Money. It's it's bad.
It sucks.
I don't usually begrudge a game for having bad DLC,
No,
so
no.
I never really bothered me. But yeah, I think you're right on. New Vegas, I think it's over a decade old at this point. If you're playing it for the first time, I say there's no harm in modding it a little bit. I'm usually of the sort that you should play vanilla first and then mod afterwards. But let's be real, some things have aged. Some things might need to be touched up a little bit. So I cannot fault you.
Don't be afraid to make something you love.
Yeah, go for it, I say. one of my favorite things about New Vegas is like no one playthrough is the same as the next.
Yeah.
Like everyone's experience of it is going to be different.
Yeah.
It's a masterpiece, I say.
Yeah, I mean, more than that, I think the same person can have multiple different experiences with this single game.
Yeah, I could probably go back to it this week and just be like, wow, this is completely different than what I remembered. So
Yeah.
it's just how you approach things. They don't make them like that anymore.
No. I mean, I think that we talked a little bit about Halo Infinite feeling like a 10-year-old open world game. Fallout New Vegas is a 10-year open world game, and its open world is so much more interesting, not only due to its thematic fidelity, but also because how much of it is systemically driven. There are definitely, spots on your map. Don't get me wrong. There's also just a lot of like weird, random, unpredictable, systemically driven stuff that just happens, right? While NPCs go about their days in towns that Halo Infinite can't recreate, It just doesn't have that capacity. There's nothing going on behind the scenes,
Well,
So
there's just not enough money for that.
yeah, not enough money, not enough time. Those servers don't pay for themselves.
It's almost like that format isn't meant for Halo.
Makes you think. Square peg in a round hole situation.
Yeah.
So my number 2 is Shin Megami Tensei 5. So, spoiler alert, what my number 1 is. But with my top 2, usually I'm kind of like, I dig narratives. But for this year, I feel like the best overall playing games made it. Like, I just love the way this game plays. Like, I think it's a very fun turn-based RPG. Like the gameplay is strategic. Like the boss fights are intense, and they make you think about each action you're taking, like whether you're wasting a turn to buff your party or you're desperately trying to get an attack out. I think this game is a lot of fun. It saddens me that there aren't more turn-based RPGs back there. Like I think they're so much more interesting than action-based role-playing games. I think there's just so much more to a solid strategic-based, turn-based sort of game than there is the Final Fantasy 15 or something. Like I'm thinking so much more about what I'm doing in this and that. It's sad. Like I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I really miss the big-budget Final Fantasy turn-based game. When I talked about this game a couple weeks ago, I think I was a little hard on. I suggested they pressured the player into getting microtransactions, and I think that is inaccurate. I've thought about that area a little more. And I think the focus on it was to explore and like do side quests. Like that was the way of the game telling you like, well, you're underleveled, go explore the world more. And and I did, and there are plenty of things to go see. Maybe it could have been communicated a little better in game, but I think suggesting they were pressuring the player into getting microtransactions was pessimistic of me. But I'm just so used to seeing that from other games. That's kind of what I expect,
Mm-hmm.
If you want like an old school feeling RPG, this will do it. Like this feels like it feels right at home, like in the PS2 glory days. It's just a great game. The story is, like a lot of it is fill in your own. Like you kind of put the dots together yourself. But they also spelled out a little bit more for you than Nocturne. Like ultimately, it's like a big battle royale featuring the gods going for like the right to recreate the world. Like it's not super deep, but it is interesting.
That is cool.
The hidden boss to get in order to get like the best ending is Shiva from Hindu mythology. So it's cool.
Oh wait, I thought that was from Final Fantasy.
No,
mythology.
shockingly, I know. No, it's the Ice Shiva, and you also fight Ifrit and Ramu and all those fun guys.
Oh
Yeah.
no! Wait a minute.
Those are real?
Those what?
Wait, don't tell me that Thor from the Marvel Cinematic Universe is
Oh yeah.
not just.
No,
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Well, Thor is a long-time Shin Megami Tensei summon. Not to suggest that the MCU Thor has stolen Thor from Shin Megami, but there you go.
Childhood ruined.
Well, let's be real here. He is.
Destroyed. If you have a Switch and you like RPGs, like I think this is like such a no-brainer. It is like a little more hardcore than the Persona types. Like if you go in expecting a Persona-style story, you're going to be really pissed off because you're not going to get that. As reviews have pointed out over and over again, it is not a Persona-style game. It is a game first and foremost, and I liked it. Like, that's really all there is to it. Like, it was a meme for a long time because it was announced whenever the Switch was first announced and just, like, went away forever. It was like, this game is vaporware, but I'm glad it existed and I'm glad it came out.
This year was the year
Yeah.
of the vaporware games, man.
It was.
You had Psychonauts, you had Shin Megami Tensei, Metroid Dread was literally like a DS game.
Yeah, that's true.
So that disappeared off the earth. So, and Halo Infinite, I mean, come on.
Yeah, you're right about that. It is the year of vaporware, so it's fitting that my top two are vaporware. But yeah, I would say it's not for Cheston because it's just a baby getting into the turn-based games. But
Thank you.
maybe
Thank you.
in a decade, when you've got more experience under your belt, you think you'll be into it. But for right now, give it a pass. But everyone else out there, I fully recommend it.
I'll stick to the first Paper Mario.
That is a good game too. Just a completely different sort of game, but very good.
Actually, it's a fantastic.
It is a fantastic game.
We'll talk more about that when we get back.
Cheston, number one game of the year, Paper Mario. No. So Cheston, what's your number one?
Well, it's got to be Streets of Rage 2. I mean, here we go. No, I'm joking. It's a joke.
Okay, I was about to say, like,
I
it
do
goes
like
off your
Streets of Rage
format
2.
completely, but
My game of the year is Hitman 3.
well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I guess more properly, my game of the year is Hitman, just period, because the way that these games are is that they're all kind of interlocking pieces.
To me, I look at Hitman for you what Kiseki was to me last year. This was like your big arc of the year going through the Hitmans.
It was when I got the computer, the PC from Setzer, and I wanted to test it out and play some games on it, and Hitman was on sale for I think $12. And originally the reason I started it was because I always thought it would be like the perfect hangout and stream game. Because I knew from watching it myself that it's an inherently performative game. You can do all kinds of goofy stuff. And at that, Hitman is probably better than any game ever made. I cannot think of another game where you can be so improvisational all the time, just constantly coming with new wacky ways to do things. You know, every single mission plays a little differently, and so you never quite know what you're going to end up doing. Recently, I had a mission where I mentioned the IT guy the other day, and this is tied in with that. I disguised myself as an IT guy to get access to this lady's desk. And the game has a script for what you're supposed to do from there. I play Hitman with all the mission markers off because I think it discourages you from being creative. And so I didn't have like a mission marker telling me where to go next after I got on the computer. Instead, I turned around and noticed that if I had a screwdriver, I could undo the window that she stood against so that if she were to press against it, she would fall to her death. And suddenly, like, my mind became fixated on that. But the problem was that I was an IT guy, and so if I did that, it would raise everybody's alarm because they'd be confused why an IT guy was messing with the window. I'll go on the record as an IT guy and say that I could probably murder someone, and everybody would think I was probably doing something
like, well,
helpful
to make the internet go
for the
quicker.
internet.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, despite that logical fallacy, you know, I saw that, like, oh man, I have to do this, but I can't. I don't. You know, I want to get a decent rating. I don't want to raise too many alarms. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and that's where the game became performative, and it became an extension of real world logic. I was like, okay, how do I get these guys away from this window? You know, I could like throw a coin or something stupid, but that only distracts them for a minute. I was like, wait a minute, what if I pull a fire alarm and they go into like an evacuation drill? That should give me just enough time to clip past them and undo the window. And there were a few hitches here and there with some people still kind of hanging around when I pulled the fire alarm, but it worked. It was a totally improvisational thing that worked, and my reward was I got to see this woman push on a glass and hilariously fall to her death. And I say hilarious because every character in that game that isn't smart is basically just like a character from The Sims. So when she fell to her death, there's just a lot of people standing around going, huh, well, that's weird. Huh. Well, sucks to be her, you know. And they, you know, you see them carry her body around in a body bag and just drop it in a random place. But, you know, that was why I got into Hitman, because of that. And then it was actually midway through Hitman 2, I was going to stream it, and my friend Goosey, who usually attends those streams, couldn't end up making it, and everybody else was busy, so I was just playing it by myself. And then I realized that on its own merits, Hitman 2 and all the Hitmen are just outstanding, best in their class stealth games, which is weird because stealth games kind of suck.
They do.
And so Hitman is the exception to the rule. It is a game about acquiring disguises and acquiring credentials as a result thereof. So you're just constantly, as you progress through a level, trading up your costumes until you get to a point where you have more access than you did before, and ultimately you get access to your target. And so in that, I mean, it's I think pretty unmatched, because most stealth games are just kind of bland and watching enemy patterns. And there's certainly some of that here, but you really do feel like you are learning an entire environment as you play throughout it. And I think the final point to add here is that I actually haven't finished Hitman 3. I haven't finished its story. But I have been spending a lot of time just playing some of the side stuff that is in these games. So they have these things called Elusive Contracts, which have you go back into maps you've already played, and they give you a new target with a little bit of story. But these targets are typically a lot harder to figure out because there's no story missions to possibly even get you close to them. And so you just really have to use your knowledge of the level from the story and use your intuition to figure out this NPC's path and what makes them tick. And you also only, and this is key, you only get one shot at it. So if you mess up, you're out of luck, which makes it a very intense little stealth session where you're just like, okay, if I do a bunch of goofy stuff and totally go off the walls, I might get caught, and then I might not get a chance at this target again until they show up again in the game world. And it makes for a very nice twist on what is already a excellent stealth game. And also, I was able to kill the 2 Home Alone bandits the other night in this game, which was really cool. I was going to disguise myself as Santa, but Santa disappeared into nothingness suddenly. I had a sword drawn, prepared to stab him in the throat and take his disguise. But instead, I just had to settle for finding the 2 Home Alone guys, who, as I said, the characters in this game are just Sims. So they had gathered in some location and were sitting there stupidly giggling about the stuff they had stolen. And I just shot them and got out with nobody catching me. And I got 4 stars for it.
Moment of the year right there.
Really, for me, every time I play Hitman, I have a moment that is one of the best moments in any game I've ever played, because you just never know. You never know how your assassination is going to turn out. You could force a lady to fall through a big glass pane. You could disguise yourself as a real estate agent, show your target a house, trap them in a weird bomb shelter, and then bomb them to smithereens. You just never know what you're going to do. You could disguise yourself as a dead person and use an ancient burial dagger from 200 years ago to stab someone who's gloating to your dead body about how cool they are and how they've taken all of your stuff. I mean, you just never know where it's going to go. That actually happened, for the record. I didn't just make that up. That's disguise myself as a dead person and attended my own funeral and then stabbed someone to death as they gloated about their life with me being dead.
That sounds very open-ended. I appreciate that.
It is extremely open-ended. There's no path that doesn't feel fun to pursue. I often end up, because I don't put on the mission markers, I often end up accumulating a treasure trove of possibilities before I end up settling on one. And, sometimes I settle on the most fun, and sometimes I settle on the one that's going to finish the mission because I've been playing for 3 hours.
You got to move on.
And I'm tired. Yeah. I love Hitman, and I'm so sad it took me this long, but also so happy that I was able to play all of these games for a total of $20. It was a fantastic
It's quite a
purchase.
deal, I'd say.
And yeah, it is a game I will be coming back to for years because of the way it is set up. It is a sublime game, and I recommend everybody try it for one reason or another.
I do have to agree, though, that this has been a Kiseki-esque arc with lots and lots of Hitman this year, so I'm glad to see that it was time well spent.
Yes, glad to see it represented.
Mm.
You gotta give the franchise respect on the Game of the Year thing.
I was very happy that I was able to get Hitman 3 before this, so I could actually say it without just being like, well, I'm sure Hitman 3 is a lot like Hitman 2. That's kind of where my head was at for
It's a respectable winner. I got nothing bad to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
Also snubbed at the Game Awards, but it's okay. I don't expect this game is going to alienate people, so I really don't
Much
expect
more respectable winner than last year's Clubhouse games.
I disagree, but that's
okay. You know what? It's your list. So, Setzer, what is your number one?
Well, do you
I
even
know,
need
right?
to ask?
Streets of Rage 2. Listen, I know it didn't get a real release this year, but it was a port of a Genesis game that is just fantastic.
It is.
No, my number one this year is Deathloop. You know, as I've said many times, I'm a huge Arcane fan, not only because of the quality of the gameplay, which I think is, you know, these days at least, is really unique to Arcane, but also the quality of the worlds. They make such uniquely believable, lived-in, ergonomic, functional worlds, and that just is a huge appeal to me. In a way that I think a lot of games just don't, or a lot of fiction in general just don't care about. But it just is a huge plus to me. I can't overstate how much I love to just explore their worlds. All three of them, you know, Dishonored, Prey, and Deathloop. And I think that Deathloop is so interesting. Its world is so interesting because the 1960s kind of aesthetic is so rare, not just in games, but in fiction in general, in a way that, you know, Dishonored's alternate 19th century is a unique take on that idea, but it's an idea that's had a lot of unique takes, right? 1960s, 70s is relatively unexplored, or underexplored, I should say. And yeah, I think that I mean, you look at this world and things look physical. You know, they look tangible, they look ergonomic in a way that is just so elusive. You know, I mean, they hired real fashion designers, real musicians. You know, they made some of the props in the real world just to see, how does this feel? How does this fit? And I can't say enough good about that level of craftsmanship, attention to detail, and flat out love.
Yeah, it sounds like they really did their homework.
Yeah, I mean, it goes beyond homework into this just legitimate beauty in interior design, in graphic design, fashion design, you know, architecture, guns and vehicles that just have this amazing je ne sais quoi of they look functional and fantastical. You know, if you look at the snow trucks or any of the cars in this game, you'll see what I mean, where they look so evocative of so many of the automobiles of that era, but they're different and they're strange, and it's just this parallel evolution to Earth that I love. I just love it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it was right up your alley.
I will say it is high on my list of most anticipated games of next year when it comes to
Yeah.
Game Pass,
Well,
presumably.
I bought it for $12 dues, so I look forward to playing it myself.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
I would say so.
The aesthetic trappings aside, I think the gameplay is interesting and fun. You know, I said I really enjoy the Arcane style of gameplay that's more about analyzing a situation, figuring out how are you going to overcome that, you know, based on what is your goal in that situation, and then executing that plan as best as you can, and either you do so and you feel incredible, You feel like an assassin, or things go wrong and you have to adapt. And I think the magic of Deathloop is when I play these kinds of games, any kind of immersive sim, whether it's Arcane or it's Deus Ex, or really even a game that's not really an immersive sim, but an exploration game like Jedi Fallen Order. I play it in a very specific way where I thoroughly sweep the entire map and meticulously inspect every detail and loot every last little collectible or treasure or whatever, and then I go on my objective, right? In Dishonored, you only really play the levels one time, unless you want to go back through and play the entire campaign again. So you learn a lot about a level, but you don't have a chance to apply that knowledge in a way that you don't have a chance to refine your execution based on what you learn from previous executions, right? Whereas in Deathloop, the environment, the enemies, they're always the same each time you loop. And by the end of the game, you can, what levels that I would spend, say, an hour in when I started, I could go through in like 5 minutes by the end of the game because I knew where everything was. I knew that if I waited for this person here to do this, I could take them out silently, and that would leave an opening for this guy over here, which is going to draw this guy's attention. So I can, use this power to avoid that, move over here to this spot, and then I can, teleport over. That'll get me closer to my goal, knock out this window, drop in here, come around this corner, right? In a way that, other games don't give you that opportunity to hone in on this perfect day, right? This perfect loop, this perfect
Right.
execution.
So it's nice to be able to execute that in the same playthrough.
Yeah. And I think some of the gameplay changes in Deathloop relative to previous Arcane games like Dishonored really kind of open it up. Dishonored basically requires you to play stealth, and that's kind of a core of the game. Prey kind of requires you to play stealth, otherwise you will almost certainly deplete your resources, right, in a way that will make future challenges really, much more difficult. But Deathloop kind of, lets you take the reins a little and lets you breathe a little and says, look, if you want to go in loud, if you want to go in guns blazing, here are some tools to do that, And I think that that's just kind of refreshing. and it leads to some more like memorable moments or a greater variety in its memorable moments. The premise of the game, of course, you're in this time loop. You've got 8 targets you have to assassinate in a single day, and you have to figure out how to manipulate these people into being at the same place at the same time so that you can get them all in one day, right? Otherwise, they'll be moving around in ways that you can't get them all. And each one of these people has a really memorable fight. Even the bad end fight, where you won't be able to get them in the same day, that's memorable. The good end fight, where you can get them in the same day, that's really memorable. And everything in between. And yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I can't say enough good things about this game. It's not perfect. The controller controls, I tried to play this with my new Xbox controller and with mouse and keyboard, and the controller controls are really not great. Even by like controller shooter standards, I had a really hard time adjusting to it and stuck with mouse and keyboard. I talked a lot about the performance and technical issues I had, which took a lot of time to tune and hone in on. The story, I think it has a cool story, but it's so opaque, and trying to get this game to tell its story to you is like pulling teeth. Some of the dialogue is just groan inducing, like grit your teeth and just try to pretend the characters aren't talking. Even then, the characters, the voice actors do such an amazing job delivering this material, and not all the material is bad, not by a long shot. And That is super impressive. The story that is there, if you can dig through it and you have the patience and fortitude to, painstakingly find all of these notes and audio recordings and read or listen, you'll come away with a understanding of what's a pretty cool story. I think that the biggest disappointment with this game is probably its Achilles heel, its tragic flaw, which is how much it holds your hand. It's very much an objective marker kind of game. Every objective is marked for you, and you can always find it very easily, which is, really kind of a disappointment to me. I think people might need that, though. I guess what gets me about Deathloop is so many critics are giving it like 10 out of 10 flawless scores. It's not flawless.
Right.
It's not. So many fans, or maybe like, fan aligned kind of YouTube critics are just shitting on this game, saying it's irredeemably bad. It's not. It's a
I've
very
seen that
good
too.
game.
That's really strange.
Yeah. It's a really good game. It is a really good game. It's a 4 out of 5 from me. And I would say I've only played 3, 4 out of 5 games this year. So that's a really high score from me.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that you don't usually heap such praise on games.
Yeah.
So
when I finished this game, I felt homesick for its world, I felt like I just wanted to boot it up and go back to some of those levels. It's wild.
you always kind of long for those kind of experiences that make you like wish you could go back.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna sound lame, but like when I beat Persona 5 for the first time, I was like, man, I really miss those characters.
Yeah.
I want to go back.
Yeah.
So I kind of get what you're saying.
Yeah, just wait. There's a snowstorm that blows in over Black Reef every day. And when I say every day, I mean because of the loop. But the characters don't remember that this keeps happening. I went to an area called Freestad Rock during the afternoon when snow was piling up. And I found myself on top of this like beautiful 60s pop style gazebo type of setting. The wind is howling, the snow is blowing. There's an original love ballad with this really haunting melody playing over a radio. And I'm looking over the balcony watching, this NPC complain that he paid a lot of money to come to this island and become eternal. And here he is shoveling snow, right? And it's just sublime. It's such a sublimely atmospheric moment. If you go into this game looking for a randomized experience, a roguelike, you're going to be disappointed. That's not what it is. That's not what it's trying to be. It's a game about learning an environment, practicing on that environment, analyzing the results of your actions, refining them for the next loop, and becoming just super efficient at it. And that's super unique to me, and I loved it.
Well, I'm excited to give it a go when I get a chance to.
Absolutely should.
I guess it falls on me. And my number one is pretty obvious. It's Metroid Dread. We talked about that a little bit earlier, so I don't have a lot to add to our little conversation there. I think it is beat for beat one of the best games ever made. It feels like they brought a Super Nintendo game into the modern era. Like if they ported this to 16 bits and it was just like, here's a new Super Nintendo game, like this makes sense. It feels just like it. The things they do to make you feel tension is admirable. It almost feels like a survival horror games at times because you're trying to get away from these big ol', like they're called immies. You're trying to get away from those, and it's just very tense and satisfying when you do. It's just darn near perfect. Like the only thing that's missing is like a memorable soundtrack, but for the type of game it is, it doesn't really need that.
We did this game a disservice last week by not including as a best moment nominee when you actually escape from an enemy, like when you reverse its grapple, because the way those work is that if they get close to you, they grab you and they kill you.
Yes.
And you have exactly one shot to reverse them, and it is a very tight window.
But when you do,
but every once in a while you do it, and then you like back away and you charge up your enemy killing beam, and it's like, whoa!
It feels good. Yes.
It feels good.
I've had to use that to get away from enemies a couple times, and it always feels satisfying when you pull it off. you will die a lot. If you hate getting game overs, this is certainly not your sort of game, because there's a lot of trial and error involved. Some would say Soulsian, but I would not. And I'm sure Cheston would, because he likes this game, and he likes to poop on
Yep.
souls. So
Sure do.
I don't know. Like, I feel like in 10 years, you're going to look back and people are going to be like, this game is one of the best ever. So
I will replay this game a lot, just like I do Super
it
Metroid.
kind of opened my eyes to the genre a little bit, because I'm hit or miss on Metroidvanias, because I don't like backtracking at all. This kind of like made me see that what I was missing from the genre, like the feeling of like the powerful feeling you get when you go back over an area and you just completely waltz over it with your new abilities. It's just great.
Do what you must. You must play Hollow Knight.
Well, I want to play. This makes me want to play Symphony of the Night real bad.
Oh, screw that game. That's for babies. You play Hollow
Well, I
Knight.
will at some point, but it just makes me want to experience more as a genre, because if this is the peaks of it, then I love what I see.
Mhm.
So, but there's really not much more. Like Cheston touched on Dread pretty well when he talked about it, but I think it's the best game this year. And really, any of my top 5, like I think Demon Souls, what I gave my number 1 last year. I don't know if Demon Souls would make my top 5 this year. There was a lot of talk about how loaded or how bare this year was. I just don't see it. Like, I think this year was incredible.
Mhm.
So
I agreed for the first half, but by the end of this half, it was just like thing after thing after thing for me personally. After Dread, and then Mario Party, and then even things like Forza, I thought was excellent, and didn't make my top 5. Wasn't an honorable mention, but I mean, it was pretty great.
I think it comes from people that only play Sony
Infinite
AAA sort of
Gunk.
stuff.
I did think it was kind of a weak year for indie games.
Yeah, a little bit.
But that could just be me. I didn't play a lot of them. I've heard a lot about Chicory, which just came to Switch,
Chicory
and I
Dickory
plan to
Dock.
check out.
Yeah.
Right, Chicory Dickory Dock. And Inscription, which is not on the Switch, so I don't plan to check out. I thought 12 Minutes was pretty good, and that was an indie game.
Oh,
So
well, everyone else disagrees with you. It's an affront to gaming.
yeah, I know.
I guess that'll wrap it up for us. We're probably
For the year.
Yes, we're probably going to take a couple weeks off for the holidays, but we'll be back in the new year. Until then, appreciate you hanging with us for so long. You can reach us on Twitter at alltodaypod or on email alltodaypodcast@gmail.com. This is Derek.
I'm Setzer.
And Cheston, wishing everybody a happy holiday.
Yes, we'll see you next year. Goodbye.
Adios.
See ya.